Perfectus in Mundo. Chapter 7. Written by Bobo the Hobo. Find Bobo the Hobo on DeviantArt for even more stories. And visit patreon.com/Bobo the Hobo. Pledge at a certain tier to join the exclusive Discord channel, to chat with other Weight Gain story fans, and even the hobo himself. We're so happy to see that you're feeling better, Aubrey. Her mother had said it while piling her plate high with breakfast. Eggs and toast and bacon and grits and tri-tip and pancakes. Everything that Aubrey had wanted for breakfast for every day that she had been stuck in that puny old body that she'd left behind. No, outgrown. You've even got your appetite back and everything. To say as much would have been an understatement, but Aubrey didn't care to correct her mother. Not as she spoiled and doted over her in the manner that she had grown accustomed to. She hadn't quite bothered to think about what sort of melancholy had afflicted her in this reality, or what her obsession with coming back here had been equated to, now that reality had become twisted again. Come to think of it, what possibly could have? This world was perfect, and Aubrey had never been happier in her entire life. That's right, Mama, Aubrey panted as she struggled against the meat of her stomach. I'm right back where I belong. And neither her mother nor her sister understood what she had meant by that. But it had been such a relief that Aubrey was back to normal that neither of them cared enough to dwell on the matter. No longer restricted by the body that she had known naturally, Aubrey had been free to indulge herself for as long as possible. The upper limits on her appetite were incredible, only exceeded by her affinity for stuffing her face. The obsession with food that had come with this body, lost in the translation between realities, had come back in full force as soon as she'd woken up. The deep, cavernous rumblings that emanated from far inside of her stomach had been the catalyst for her waking up. She had been so overjoyed with the fact that she'd awoken in a world where everything was right again, that she'd almost made an attempt at jumping out of bed, despite it being an utter impossibility for her to do so. Aubrey was enormous again. 600+ pounds of big, beautiful brunette with a presence and appetite to match, and she had a lot of catching up to do to make up for the time that she had been away. Why the fuck are you throwing things out of your bedroom window? In the rare instances where Riley had ventured outside, their mother had asked her to take out the trash. She had heard her sister struggling with the windowsill. Then she'd seen her chuck something far out into the woods near their neighborhood. Whatever it was had caught the sunlight and twinkled on its way crashing back down to earth. She hadn't mentioned it until they were in the car together. Getting a word in edgewise when it came to conversations during mealtime wasn't exactly easy for either of them, but Aubrey could be especially difficult to navigate while she was eating. "Why the fuck were you watching me?" had been Aubrey's best attempt at deflection, peppered with a little scoff that had creased the second of her third chins as she strapped herself into the back seat of their mama's minivan. It had seemed like a bad idea to explain, in any world, that she had gathered that the little gold coin that she'd found on the floor of an antique shop had the ability to transport her between, at least, two realities. She doubted that Riley would have believed her in either of them, but she especially didn't want to risk wrecking the perfect life that had fallen into her big, squishy lap here by getting committed to, like, a mental institution or something. Riley just sighed and rolled her eyes, content in letting her sister ogle celebrities on her phone while she waddled up to the front seat. Aubrey knew that she might have come across as a little bitchy when it came to Riley, but even if she didn't know it, Riley had been acting high and mighty to her for years. Always this perfect little personal trainer, going from gym to gym and being popular with just about everyone. Meanwhile, Aubrey had been stuck as this milquetoast little wallflower, stringy and plain despite her ambitions towards a superior size. She'd make it up to her, somehow, probably at lunch. It was nice, the two of them getting to go out and stuff their faces together. The car groaned as it struggled to support more than half a ton of woman, as Riley and Aubrey puttered along down the road and towards downtown, where some of their favorite eateries were located in both realities. At home, the crepe factory was this shitty little pancake place that was almost going out of business. But here, it was a veritable breakfast bar assembly line, where two people like Aubrey and Riley could really stuff themselves until they were retaining maple syrup. It had been a favorite of theirs then, and it was a favorite of theirs now. Riley had practically jumped at the chance to enjoy a little breakfast time indulgence, just as eagerly as she would have back when she was a wiry little gym rat. Even her relationship with her sister was better here. Why would she ever want to go back to the way things were supposed to be? "Taylor sounds so much better now that she's fat," Aubrey said from the back seat. "Like you can really hear it in her voice, you know?" "Yeah, I guess she has been packing it on lately, huh?" Riley paused. "I don't know. I kind of liked her better when she was skinny. You. Remember when she was skinny? Yeah, back when she was a country music singer. I don't know, I just liked her better. Leave it to Riley to like somebody better when they were skinny. Despite the passion with which the two of them had entered the crepe factory, only one of them had eyes that weren't bigger than their stomach. Of course, whose eyes could have matched the sheer size of Aubrey's gastronomic abilities? Whose anything for that matter? In a world full of overweight men, women, and children, and a society that enabled them so, Aubrey could turn heads from the moment that she burst through the double doors, all the way until she wobbled back through them, and the latter moment hadn't come for some time. Now, all that isn't to say that Riley hadn't put in an honest effort at keeping pace with her sisters. She weighed almost 400 pounds by herself in this reality, and she clearly hadn't gotten that way through modesty. The way with which she attacked the breakfast bar, toppling towers of pancakes and nearly drowned in the syrup and butter, had been very reminiscent of her younger sister's feats of strength. However, by the end of it all, she had hit her ceiling much sooner than Aubrey would. She was left a stuffed, gasping mess while the other end of the table steadily filled and refilled. Oh, come on. You're not done yet, are you? Aubrey was having the time of her life. Days of not being able to indulge herself in the manner with which she had become accustomed to had been absolute hell for her. Now that she had a body that could keep up with it, she was intent on using it. You've barely eaten a thing, Riley sighed dismissively, obviously uncomfortable with the subject. I'm just not hungry, okay? But you've got to be hungry. Oh, look, they've got your favorite out. She pointed with effort to the pink strawberry waffles with chocolate syrup being placed out onto the serving area. Aubrey had been talking about them through the entire drive up to the restaurant, and had been crestfallen when she had seen that they weren't being served upon their arrival. Why don't you go grab another plate, huh? Riley clicked her tongue and glared at her sister. A holdover from between realities, Aubrey supposed. She had often done this whenever she was angry at someone, her, their mother, but Aubrey couldn't quite understand just what it was that had set her off so much. Look, I'm not hungry, okay? Riley said tersely. Stop trying to make me eat. Whatever. Okay, gosh. Aubrey had no such issues with continuing to stuff her face. It was what she dreamed about doing for so many years. She wasn't going to let Riley's comparatively tiny appetite do her in for the day. If she'd have still been able to get up from the table without exhausting herself, she might have finished sooner, but as stuffed as she was more or less dependent on her sister to refill her plate. Look, I just don't want to get back up and, She glared back at the self-service station, already awash in similarly sized and shaped fatties looking to pile their plates high. It was a good sample size of the population of this new world. Hardly anyone in the restaurant weighed less than 200 pounds, and almost all of them were similarly stomach-minded. In Aubrey's ideal world, where weight was beauty and her ambitions to be big and beautiful were the mainstream, Riley's reluctance was seen as a sharp deviation from the norm. You know I'm trying to lose weight. The words had come as such a shock to Aubrey. The fact that, in this reality of all places, that there were people who were worried about their weights, that she couldn't do much of anything other than laugh. Not a big boisterous number, but an awkward little chuckle. Something to help lighten the mood between them, as Riley seemed rather upset by the presumed pressure that her sister had placed on her to conform. It hadn't done much good at lightening anything. Riley's pretty brown brow furrowed angrily at the perceived slight as her face hardened. God. Don't fucking laugh, she hissed. I know it's weird, but could you at least pretend that you're my loving, supportive sister who wants me to be happy? No, it's just... Aubrey bit her tongue as best she could manage, trying to reel her shock back in. I mean, yes, I can. It's just... why? I don't know. This route of conversation should have been familiar to Aubrey. In retrospect, it would be... Her reflection on their time together at the crepe factory would give her a little more insight into how things between these versions of them worked. The way that Riley, normally so confident and bubbly, shrunk into herself at the mention of changing her body was not that unlike how Aubrey had felt about herself. That is, before the flip of a magical coin had turned existence on its head. But even in the moment, she could tell that her sister had been uncomfortable with moving forward under this banner. Aubrey had been enjoying herself for as long as she'd been placed in this perfect world. But it had mostly been because of her ability to overpower the normally perfect Riley in conversation. This had been the first time that it hadn't brought her joy, and that Riley's status as the seemingly more meek sister had left her feeling a touch uncomfortable. Whatever, okay, I'll get you some of the stupid waffles if you'll drop it. Deal. Aubrey agreed with a smile. Sorry for being such a bitch. Riley was happy to oblige her sister, pushing back from the table and waddling towards the service station. Aubrey had been left scratching her head in the moment, unable to understand why anyone would want to lose weight in a world where big was beautiful. Fortunately, by the time Riley returned with the promised plates of waffles, Aubrey had long lost interest in the topic. End of chapter 7.